Of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. Sing it again. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my...
I am not a preacher. I do not think my calling or my anointing is in preaching. I do believe it's in the prophetic. So if I offend you today with what I'm about going to speak on, maybe that's just my prophetic gifting targeting something in your life. And I mean no offense. So, with all that said. But today was truly just to honor my dad, and he's not here, for Pastor Appreciation. But if you could turn into your Bibles to Hebrews, we're going to chapter 12. Most of today's sermon is about a word that a lot of us don't like, and that is discipline. However, God doesn't use discipline in a way that we think of disciplining a child. For example, Dee got in trouble this week a lot at daycare. We got called Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday through Thursday, because on Monday he had 3 reports from daycare. So we gave him some physically discipline. That really didn't help, because then we had to go back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But God uses discipline as a training, as to teach us, just like when we get up in the morning, the discipline to take a shower, the discipline to brush our teeth, disciplines to train us to do things correctly. So you're going to be hearing a lot of discipline. But God uses trials as ways to discipline us, to train us. Right. Trials are common. There are many kinds of trials that everyone encounters. Trials, there's going to be a phrase that you're going to hear a lot today, and if you are a note taker like I am, especially when someone preaches, this will be something that you may want to write down. A trial is a painful circumstance, so it's full of pain, but it's allowed by God to change my conduct, which is the way I act, and my character, and character is the way people perceive me. So trials are painful circumstances allowed by God to change my conduct and my character. So let's read Hebrews 12. We're going to start at verse 4. In your struggles against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. Just a side note, I read out of NIV, so that really irritates my grandmother in the back who has her King James Version. So I'm an NIV girl because it's directly translated from Greek. I went to Southeastern Bible College, so just got a lot of training in NIV. So in your struggles against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood, and you have completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son. It says, "My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves. He chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardships as discipline. God is treating you as He is treating you as his children. God is treating you as his children. For what children who are not disciplined by their father, if you are not disciplined and everyone undergoes non-discipline, then you are non-legitimate, not true sons, and not daughters at all." So I'm going to read verse 8 again. If you are not disciplined and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, meaning you're not really sons and daughters of God. So a trial is a painful circumstance allowed by God to change my conduct, the way I act, and my character, the way people perceive me. So everyone is going through a trial right now. If you are thinking to yourself, life's pretty good, nothing really bad's going on, happy wife, happy life. Currently right now in the Wheeler house, it's not a real happy wife, happy life, because he spent too much money on pigs this season. But if you are thinking that I've never been through a trial, that everything's going good right now, you might need to check your walk with God, and you might need to check your heart with God. And we can check your heart after service today. Or maybe you just got out of a trial and you're like, whew, glad that's done. Just know it is coming back. It's not a matter if, but when. Many words and terms for trials in the New Testament include suffering, hardship, difficulty, chastising, and of course, discipline. But we're going to speak on discipline today and how disciplines and trials go hand in hand. And that a trial is a painful circumstance allowed by God to change my conduct and my character. You're going to hear me say that a lot. I'm on page 3 of my notes, so for those of you that are counting. My fourth graders, I teach fourth grade, and this is my 6th year teaching fourth grade, and I absolutely love it. But they know when I want them to hear something, we say it at least 10 times a day. We even say the same phrase in math, science, math. We repeat it. And they know that if I'm constantly repeating it, then that must be a key for them to do well on the test. Fourth grade's an FSA tested grade. How my students perform on the test, how they perform in their trial, determines if I get paid and I get a raise. So they're always hearing, oh, that must be tested because you're saying it a lot. I was like, yes. So you're going to hear it a lot. A trial is a painful circumstance allowed by God to change my conduct and my character. When God disciplines us or gives us a trial to go through, He has a good purpose in mind. God's purposes in our discipline are very specific. He's allowing us to be disciplined. He's allowing this trial to go in on our life for a very specific reason. He is not like Satan, who just condemns us with generalities, like you're not good enough. Well, you're going to fail at that. God pushes you through that because His goal is specific. Amen. Satan's goal is just for you to fail. God has a specific goal for you to be victorious. So trials are discipline. Trials are unpleasant, and they are painful. For you note takers, you may want to jot this down. That even though they are painful, remember that the pain is momentary. It lasts only for a moment. Now, God's moment and our moment are very different. One of the many trials Brett and I have on in our life right now is D, as Dayton. For those of you that have been around the church family for now 3 years, you know that our motto is for a season or for a lifetime. And that this trial right now with D doesn't seem very momentary to us, but the pain that we're going through is only momentary to God. Because the profit, the outcome of the trial, is immense, and the promise, which is eternity, is conditional. Amen. So I'm going to say it one more time. A trial is a painful circumstance allowed by God to change my conduct, the way I act during the trial, and our character. Because when God brings us to a trial, unfortunately, it's already been written. We can turn the page in the book, but we're still in the book. The story still has to go on. So Jesus knew what it was like to be treated as a son under discipline. He knew what it was like to face a distasteful, difficult circumstance with no immediate way out. There was only one way through His trial. and that it was for him to accept it and finally to submit to God's will. We can read all in the New Testament that Jesus prayed for this trial to leave him. He prayed in the garden, God, take this cup from me. He in the Bible, it shows where Jesus actually worried about something to the point that he worried that he sweated blood. Jesus wanted out of his trial. But once he submitted to God's will, the promise was conditional. It was forever. It was eternity. Jesus knew the promise. He knew the outcome of his trial. In the Old Testament, the person who I think about the most, who's went through more trials than anyone in the Old Testament could probably go through, was Job. But Job expressed a confidence that God would bring positive change from his suffering. If you think back to a few minutes ago, I said that discipline was a synonym for the word of trial. For those of you that don't know what a synonym is, it means a word that means the same thing. Sorry, I got 4th grade teacher brain on all the time. So recently in August, for those of you that have been in our church for a long time, August 13th was probably the most devastating trial I went through. It was devastating to me. I can't imagine how Brett would describe it, because it happened to Brett. For those of you who don't know the story, I'll tell you real quick. Huh?
I didn't know where you're going.
August the 11th. Okay. So August the 11th. That weekend, my mother-in-law had scheduled a livestock showmanship workshop for kids across the state, and also a livestock photography workshop for kids who wanted to become more familiar with livestock photography. For those of you that know me, I take a lot of livestock show pictures, and that has turned into a hobby and a side job, and I love it. Brett and I work with kids all the time with their animals, and that's Brett's job, and we were excited to be a part of it. But at the same time, we did not want a wild, banshee 3-year-old running around all of those animals, so my mom had Dayton for the weekend. And Saturday night after the showmanship, day 1, clinic was wrapping up. We went to dinner with friends, and we stayed at my mother-in-law's house. And Brett came to bed, and he's like, I need your Fitbit. Something's not right with my heart. And I was like, okay, you're just having a panic attack, we're fine. So I just threw my Fitbit, and I'm like, just breathe, you'll be fine. And he was like, no, Ash, something's up. My heart beats 143 beats per minute. And he's like, we gotta go. Like, we need to run to the hospital. For him to even want to go to the hospital, I knew it was bad. So my in-laws live in Plant City, and right there in their little neighborhood is a Brandon Emergency Center outlet. And we went there, and they accepted him right away. At that point, they were hooking him up to all these machines, and his heart rate was 197 beats per minute. I had to be straight-faced, but I was like, God, what are you doing? If I lose him, then DCF takes my baby. And the one thing I've always wanted was a husband and a baby, and now you're going to take all that away from me. And that's what I was thinking in my brain. So I immediately call Mom, and I step outside. I'm like, I need you. And she's like, don't worry, Dee Dee, which is my mother-in-law's already called me. Your dad has D. We're on our way to you. And by that time, they had ran an EKG. And what really scared me is I thought we were really like in a Grey's Anatomy episode. They had ripped open his shirt. They had the stickers ready to move the things and shock his heart in. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they could never get it to regulate. They were able to get it one down. They were able to get the heart rate to come down a little bit. And the nurse came in, who was so gracious and so kind. And she's like, we're going to transport him to Brandon Memorial. Just be prepared that he won't be released until his heart regulates. He and I bickered back and forth of, no, I'm going with you. And the nurse stepped in. She's like, unfortunately, you have to side with your husband. They're not going to let you go in until they see where he's going to be admitted to. Because if he's admitted to ICU, they're not going to let you in. So I was like, oh, okay, that helped my emotions. But then ICU. And this all started about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't leave the Brandon emergency outlet to 5 a.m. So ambulance came and took him. And again, the ambulance ride is a trial in itself for Brett. That really strengthened his faith too. So I go back to my in-laws' house to somewhat get asleep, and I cried to God. I'm like, God, I can't do this without him. Like, you brought us D when we didn't even know we wanted to foster a kid. Our prayer was, God, to fix my womb so I could naturally have the kid when I prayed that prayer. My prayer was to God, open a door or close it. But when I meant open a door, I meant naturally open a door. I didn't want to adopt a kid, and you brought me D when I needed him the most. And if Brett dies, they're gonna take D, and then I'm gonna have to move back in with my parents, and I can't do that again. And then I was thinking, okay, since let's say he does die, and then where am I gonna have a funeral? Nobody. We got the little Baptist group in Wauchula that we hang out with, but the bigwigs at the Baptist church really don't like Brett, so they wouldn't let us have it at First Baptist. He and I really don't like people in general, so we probably can't even have it at our home church. And he's kind of ticked off everybody in Plant City because of his attitude. Who would come to his funeral anyway, and where would we have it? Well, I'm sure. I'm on page 5 of my notes, and I'm getting there, I promise. So it's about 7:30. I didn't sleep at all. Sunday morning, 7:30 Sunday morning. I text my mom, and I was like, hey, I'm going to grab my stuff, head to the hospital. And she texts me, she's like, when I woke up this morning, your sister, Jan, was already at our house. She has D. Don't worry about anything. And I was like, okay. Because in our trial right now with D, only people who have been background checked and approved by DCF and the FBI can watch D. So that's always a worry too. And 2, the reason I didn't sleep is my father-in-law was snoring so loud that I was like, forget this, I'm just going to the hospital. So I took Brett's clothes that he had, and I just took all of our stuff to the hospital and met the cardiologist. And the first cardiologist was kind of very blunt. Basically told Brett, it either needs to regulate on its own, or we're going to have to go in and shock it and put you under anesthesia. And basically, since you are so fat, people have a 75% chance of dying because of your obesity. He pretty generically said that. He was mean. He was very mean. So that really didn't help Brett or I's frame of mind. And I'm constantly texting Mom. With Brett's permission, I texted some close friends of us that lived in Hardy County that were part of our FFA circle and our little Baptist group. Say, hey, this is a situation. Pray. And specifically pray this. Because remember, God's purpose and our discipline are very specific. So this trial with Brett taught us to be very specific with our prayers. The day kind of progressed and we saw another cardiologist. And the week kind of progressed and we saw, 2 to 3 different other ones. And everybody was kind of saying the same story. You're going to have a stress test. You're going to do an EKG. We're going to do a heart ultrasound. We're going to do all these things. But ideally, we want your heart to regulate on its own. That's the goal. For a person your size, we really need to have your heart regulate on its own. So So I text Mom, I think it was still church, and I believe that day you guys at church prayed that specific prayer that it would regulate on its own. So I'm driving. Brett wouldn't let me stay at all with him at the hospital because we wanted some normalcy for our little guy. But I'm a chicken, so I wouldn't stay at home by myself. So I didn't drive to Wauchula. I drove to Mom and Dad's and stayed there for the rest of the week, and drove back from Mayaca to Brandon until Thursday. And Brett texted me, I think Monday morning, as I'm heading back up, and he's like, it regulated last night. He's like, I could feel it. I don't know what happened. He's like, I felt it regulate. The nurse came in, started unhooking things, and she's like, no, Mr. Wheeler, it regulated last night. You should be good to go.
God be the glory.
Because we were specific in our trial. We still had to stay till Thursday to run some tests. But God allowed that particular incident to trigger some new disciplines, some training for Brett and I with our health. So let's tie it back to Hebrews, our reading. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us and respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and life? They disciplined us for a little, well, as they thought best. But God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in His holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but it's painful later on. However, it produces a harvest of righteousness and a peace for those that have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and your weak knees. So during that specific trial, God was telling me, girl, get it together. Why are you crying and having all those thoughts? Strengthen your feeble arms. Get up off your knees. Make level paths for your feet. Get your feet straight. So that the lame, for those of you that know lame, some Bible college here, lame in the Greek meant disabled, infected, not healed, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Amen. Basically, get your act together, face your trial, because God is disciplining you, so that it can change your conduct, the way you act, and your character. Hebrews tells us that if you are a follower of Christ, disciplines and trials are coming our way. Testing, reproofing, chastisement, or rebuking. Unfortunately, it's all coming. It's one of the most sobering aspects of being a Christian. Because when we feel like we're going through a test, when DCF and the courts tells us that it's a possibility they're getting their kid back, it leaves us feeling vulnerable. When a cardiologist says, hey, this needs to happen, it feels us weak and vulnerable, but God is always there. One of the purpose of discipline and going through trials is to be aware of our utter dependence on Him. He brings us through trials so that we can be dependent on Him. Look back at verse 5 and 6. And you are completely forgotten this word of encouragement. Paul wrote this to the Hebrews as an encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son. It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline and do not lose heart when He rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines the one He loves. He's letting you go through trials and disciplines because He loves you. God's disciplined you because He loves you. Far from folding His arms, God's actually rolling up His sleeves, getting ready to do something good in your life. He is far from abandoning you when you are going through these difficult trials. Actually, God is moving towards you. If God allows your life to become hard, His motivation is love. He loves you. His eyes are on you. His attention is directed toward you. All of His thoughts are about you. The goal of your pain is your restoration to a deeper sense of His love. The whole point of going through a trial is to get deeper in His love, to have an utter dependence on Him. But we think as Christians, we throw it back in God's face, but I tithe, I give, I pray, I do all this stuff. You should take this from me because you love me. You don't want me to see me in hurt, just like we don't want to see our children in hurt. God doesn't want to see us hurt, but He's disciplining us. He's training us. But His love is just not a human love. It's a biblical love because there's no quick fixes. It's a love that is willing to take you through a valley so you can stand on the hilltop. He is going to change you in the most deepest, lasting level. God is much greater than we give Him credit for. We as humans have a difficulty. Imagine that. We have difficulty accepting His work in our lives because our view of Him is so limited. We doubt Him working in our lives because our view of Him is so limited. Hard times, trials, disciplines in our life can be teachable moments. He's teaching us, He's training us that God uses to grow our faith. But oftentimes, we want to be like, no, I'm not going through that trial. I'm good. I'll stay over here. You trial all these people, and I'm fine. Leave me out of it. But oftentimes we want to put up a defense when we feel like God has put His finger of discipline on us, because He's just not disciplining our life. Some of you are gonna get mad at me. He's disciplining a place in your life that needs discipline. But oftentimes we want to put up a defense when we feel like God has put His finger of discipline on a place in our life that needs it, but we think it doesn't need it. We either want to be denial. We want to be in denial about it. We want to deny that, God, this trial of not eating carbs, like I really don't like it. So I'm going to just go through Dunkin' and get me a hash brown every now and then and not tell my husband about it. And that'll be okay. And I'll burn off those carb calories when I walk in the afternoon. I'm going to be in denial about it. Or I want to deflect it, not even pay attention that it's there. Like, I'm not the one that sees a cardiologist. I'm fine. I wear enough Spanx. I don't need to lose a whole lot of weight. Or I'll give an excuse and tell God an explanation about why I don't need to go on with it. But He has remember, God specifically trains us in areas. He specifically disciplines us in areas. So we have to get out of being in denial. We have to stop deflecting it, and we have to stop giving it an excuse. Until we get beyond these three defenses against the disciplines of the Lord, the good results that can come from our difficult experience won't arrive. The harder you push out of your trial, the further your promise is getting away from you. So if you are in this season right now of, God, hello, I need help with finances, but you're telling Him, no, I'm not tithing today because we only got $500 in the bank account and we don't get paid till Wednesday. Guilty. That was Ashley Wheeler this morning until Brett's like, why didn't you write the check? I was like, we ain't got enough money to tithe. But yet we're praying for God to help our finances. So that was me giving an excuse about why I can't tithe. And that's what Brother Don said too. It's like, we have to be submissive in the trial. We have to submit to it. And we have to admit that we have a problem that requires discipline for us to get the promise at the end. James 4:7, you don't have to flip there. I'm going to paraphrase it. But James 4:7, we probably all could say it. It says, submit yourself therefore to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. That seems so easy. To submit to God. Okay, I'm in God's will. Now, devil, leave me alone. But as you go through a trial, the devil is always standing by with his generalities, saying, God doesn't care about you. He's not going to help you. That's not how it's going to work out. But, you have to take it through a valley to get to your hilltop. Okay? Remember that. But we have to have effective resistance. If the devil is going to resist and he's going to flee from us, then we have to be effective. And we can't be effective until we be submissive to God. Effective resistance to the devil always begins with submission to God. Take an addict, and in my notes I had Mr. Jackson. The reason I had Mr. Jackson, because I knew he was going to be at Hunsaders and he wouldn't roll his eyes at me when I used him as an example. Believe it or not, I had Mr. Jackson as a high school ag teacher when I was in high school. David had Mr. Jackson when he went to Braden River Middle. Braden River Middle. If you asked David to describe the Mr. Jackson he had, it would be completely different of the Mr. Jackson I had. When David had Mr. Jackson was a functioning alcoholic. He was mean. He yelled. I'm not sure if Barry and Ashley had Mr. Jackson at Brain River, but he was not the nice ag teacher. Okay, he's the reason Carly was like, no, did my one and done in ag. However, something he got out of his class, or got kicked out of his class. However, the Mr. Jackson I had at Lakewood Ranch High School was the reason that I lived and breathed FFA. Him being my ag teacher and taking me to all these events was probably the reason I grew up in high school not liking the man I married. Yes, amen. Well, yeah, you guys won and we lost, but whatever. When Mr. Jackson finally submitted to God's will for his life, to get sober, he started making those daily disciplines because he had effective resistance to the devil to know, I'm not drinking today. I'm not doing that. I'm not. And I think he made that decision in June of something, and every June on the day of his sobriety, he says, today marks, I think this June was what, day 11,000 something, or it was like a really big number. And the same thing goes for my sister Jan. Again, I have her written down as an example because I knew if I used her as an example when she was here, she would probably hold me down and give me a hickey like she did when I was in 3rd grade for telling on her. But anyhow, Jan had to get to a point that she no longer wanted to do the drugs. She realized that her husband was leaving and taking her kids, that brought her to a effective resistance to submit under God. And she can say that's why she's clean. Even my dad had to have effective resistance to food, and that's why he's been so successful with his weight loss journey. James 1 and 2, you can turn there if you want to, but I'm going to paraphrase it again. For those of you that are keeping up with me, I'm on page 9 of my notes, so I'm almost done. Shut up. Sorry, Miss Anita. I didn't mean to say that. Miss Juanita, she'll get me. James 1 2, it says, consider your trials joyful. Consider your trials joy. So I'm going through this trial of discipline. I'm going through this hard season of my life. And God, you want me to be joyful? You want me to be joyful about it? You want me to consider it all things joy? Because joy is a supernatural delight in the person, the purpose, and for the people of God. Remember, trials are allowed by God to change our conduct and our character. Because joy is a supernatural delight in the person, purpose, and people of God. If you are saying you are a Christian and you follow Christ and you're going through this trial, and if you're not going through one now, you eventually will, Like, I'm really almost done. Oh. The reason you are supposed to be joyful is not so necessarily for you, but it's the people that are wanting to come into the kingdom. That's right. And if we are so downhearted and sad-faced and pouty pants all the time in our trial, then why would we want anyone to come join us on this walk with Christ if we're going to be mad about it? The original word for steadfast, endurance, perseverance, and patience in the Bible. This blew my mind. I had a professor in college, Dr. Sam Bennett, and Miss Juanita knows who I'm talking about. I guess he came and did a little thing at their old church while I was still in college, and he always taught us, find a word, Google it, and see what it really means in the Greek, because sometimes things get lost in translation. So I Googled the original words of steadfastness, endurance, perseverance, and patience. In Greek, they mean, the word is hupomene. So if you're ever on Jeopardy and they say, what is the Greek word for perseverance? You can say, oh, what is hupomene? Hupomene means to remain under. So, steadfastness, endurance, perseverance, and patience all mean to remain under. To endure, remain under. The ability to remain under your trial. To remain under God as He leads you, guides you through the trial. If you start to wanting to get away from it, then you're not staying under God. To endure, remain under. The ability to remain under your trial, to remain under God as He leads you, guides you through the trial. To be in a place that produces the greatest outcome. The worst thing to do is quit. But you gotta remain under, hupomene, His grace. You gotta remain under His love. You gotta remain under the trial. Because the promise is conditional. The promise is eternity. If you are fighting God's discipline, you need to realize that you aren't going to win. Remaining under the trial binds, ties together, glues together your heart to God's. God is faithful. While life on this side of eternity lasts, God's refining process continues. Your trial that you're going through is God's refining process. And when I use this refining process, basically what people do to make gold really gold, it's got to be burned, it's got to be refined, it's got to go through some stuff. So your trial is God's process to turning you into God. I'm going to read something out of, I got all my notes today from our little our Baptist Bible study group thing. They don't realize, those Baptists, that the Bible studies we've been doing lately, like, no, those will preach in a Holy Spirit church. You let my dad preach on that? We got Miss Juanita laying on the floor. We're gonna, like, that's good stuff. You just gotta preach it. You can't teach it. That's gotta be preached. One crucial difference between you and the gold ore, so the piece of gold, is that you know what's happening. You're a human. God's gave you a brain and a heart. You know you're about to go through the fire. That piece of gold mineral has no idea what it's doing.
That's right.
Gold is going to melt. You are going to put up a fight and resist.
Amen.
Gold releases its impurities under heat. You try to hang on the junk that God's trying to get rid of. Gold, as it's burning and becoming its perfection, remains silent. We humans want to scream at the top of our lungs saying, "Oh God, why me? Why me? Take this from me." Your spirit and your mouth cry out of confusion and out of frustration. But if you hupomene, remain under, you learn to submit to the refiner's fire. You learn to submit to God's purifying fire, because the results will be amazing. And as you get out of this trial, you will come out as gold. Maybe not here on earth, but in eternity, when He meets you at those golden gates, and He gives you that golden crown, when you can hear Him say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Trials are common. Everybody's going through a trial, because a trial is a painful circumstances allowed by God to change my conduct, my actions, and my character, the way people perceive me. So let's pray. Lord, I'm staying here. I'm hupomening. I'm remaining under you. I'm deciding I'm not going anywhere. I'm not looking for a way out. I'm remaining right here under the pressure of your refining work. And as I yield best I know how to you, God, I will no longer fight you. I will be no longer angry with you, no longer confused with you, no longer perplexed by you, that I trust you to get me through this trial, because you are lovingly training me. You are giving me disciplines that will change my conduct. You'll change the way I act, and you'll change the way people perceive me. I'm not going to quit, Lord, but by your grace and your strength, I'm going to keep doing things you have called me to do. I'm going to hold on to you, believing that your grace is sufficient. I'm going to get closer to you, go deeper with you as you draw me near during my suffering, during my trial, during my discipline. I embrace this trial, God. I thank you for turning these trials to gold in my life. I'm waiting to see it. I'm waiting to see the promise and the profit at end, because my hope and my trust is in you, God. In Jesus' name, amen. If you feel like you are not going through a trial, and you feel that God is not doing anything in your life, and you can't feel Him or you can't hear Him, and you don't even know if you're a child of God, feel free to come down. Pastor Kathy, Mr. Don, myself, someone will pray with you and make sure that your salvation is sure. But just know, when you accept that prayer, that this journey of being a Christian is not easy, that trials are going to come, and it's better to go through a trial with Christ than a trial alone, because eternity is promised at the end. So thank you, Pastor Kathy, for letting me be obedient. The last time I spoke here at church, some people got around, talked bad about me. I was like, no, so please don't do that to Dad. I hope it spoke to you. It spoke to me as I certainly was preparing notes yesterday, especially as we enter November and we have another court date at the end of the month, that I know God is faithful.
Yes, He is.
And that our gold of a 3-year-old little boy is in sight. So, yes.